Order. Question number 8. Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he agree with the Prime Minister's statement that Treasury forecasts are, quote, a load of nonsense because they can't get predictions in 44 days right, let alone 44 years?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I always agree with the Prime Minister, although would state my views about the Treasury forecast somewhat more generously. They have a reasonable track record, but that doesn't mean they're always right. For instance, when Treasury issued its long-term fiscal statement in 2009, it suggested that net government debt would reach 223% by 2050. Last week, when it updated that statement, the estimate is now around half of that, 124% of GDP. So you can either believe the forecasts were wrong or that the government is doing a good job of getting on top of long-term fiscal pressures.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Why does he think the Prime Minister has changed his tune on the reliability of Treasury forecasts between Saturday and Monday, given that he is now spending Treasury's forecast surpluses before he's earned them?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member that the Prime Minister is not spending the surpluses before they've been earned. In fact, the Prime Minister is very reserved in his expectations of being able to throw money around, partly because actually he's just a very accomplished political leader and doesn't have to try and buy votes the way the Labour Party does.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Does he regard tax cuts as a greater priority than restarting contributions to the New Zealand Super Fund?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, these things, of course, in the first place, they're not mutually exclusive. And secondly, the government has had a consistent policy about restarting contributions to the Super Fund, which is that when debt reaches 20% of GDP, net debt, then we'll restart contributions. But the member should read the long-term fiscal statement, because what it will show is that because the government's taken a measured approach with government spending, the long-term cost problem isn't as large as it used to be.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer, why did he backtrack on his commitment to restart contributions to the New Zealand Super Fund when the government reached surplus, especially in light of the projections of superannuation costs in the Treasury long-term fiscal statement?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I mean, the point about the Treasury forecast is simply that the long-term forecast is this. The participation rate, that is the proportion of working-age population in the workforce, is much greater than was expected 15 years ago. And over time, it means that the economy is bigger, and that means it's got more ability to carry the costs of national superannuation. I thought the member would be pleased about that rather than unhappy.
Never unhappy. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Why did he backtrack on his commitment to restart contributions to the New Zealand Super Fund when the government reached surplus?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what the member is referring to. Well, because the government position as articulated in the last budget was that when debt gets to 20% of GDP, we'll restart contributions to the Super Fund. I mean, we've had the odd challenge along the way, like the Kaikoura earthquake, which is probably going to cost quite a bit. That makes it a little bit harder, but the government can still manage.
Supplementary question, David Seymour.
Should the New Zealand public have confidence in the usefulness of the Treasury's long-term fiscal position? And if not, will the government consider amending the Public Finance Act so they no longer have to produce such, quote, nonsense?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the requirements in the Public Finance Act as a result of bipartisan support across the Parliament. The usefulness of the long-term forecasts is to, every 4 years, is to demonstrate to politicians and to the public that there are long-term consequences of what look like short-term decisions. And the good news about this most recent forecast is that if you compare this long-term statement to previous ones, the Treasury, despite itself, has to report something that's a little bit less gloomy. They prefer to report things are going to go really badly, but actually they're not going to go as badly as Treasury thought.